Hello and welcome back to episode 9, the final core episode on this series on teaching maths to children who are 4 or 4 to 5 year olds. This episode is all about the teaching of number in the final term, with all sorts of odds and ends in there to wrap up this series. I'm Rebecca the Maths Lady, here to help you love your maths teaching and to make sure that you can make sure that every one of your children really thrives and does brilliantly with their maths. So first, quick reminder, as ever with number this year, you need to continue to work on making sure that children can fluently count up to 20 and down from 20. Your daily activities should be embedded by now. What they look like at this stage of the year, if you're doing counting up by counting all the children on the mat in front of you every morning. By this stage, hopefully you might have a pretty magic wand or something and you're pointing at every child and every child individually says the number in order. So you're testing and checking that every child can do that counting up for themselves. It's so arbitrary knowing that 6 comes after 5, just needs to be rote learned as an earworm. And you need your daily routines for counting down as well, which is harder, but it really matters too. Next year, they'll be moving on to calculations like 17 subtract 3. And if they can't count down 17, 16, 15, 14, they're going to really struggle. So the more work you can do, the better on counting up and counting down. Next, working on your number of the week or your number of the fortnight. In the summer term, it's likely to be the numbers 15 to 20. We're still working on the 10 aspects of each number. Here's a quick reminder of what they are. But now, of course, it's summer term, so you can be outside as much as you can, and children can do activities like, can you find 17 stones working in pairs? And it's a really powerful activity just to try and get them to touch count to 17 and get the right number of objects. But it becomes even more powerful if you get them to organise those objects as 5s and extras. And you might want to use 10 frames like egg boxes. If these aren't resilient enough, you might want plastic ones, or you can get egg trays from grocers and just quickly bandsaw them up into sections if you need a lot very quickly. It's really helpful. But if you haven't got boxes, you could just get them to put the objects into piles of 5s and the extras to help develop their ability to see those structures, and we'll get to why that's important in just a little bit. And of course they can partition those numbers by moving objects. If you've got 16 stones, how could you make 2 piles of stones? Well, you could have a 10 and a 6, you could have a 5 and an 11, and so on, and just explore that. They don't have to be perfect and fluent at it. They are just our apprentices at this stage, having a go, enjoying number, having confidence that they can try and not feeling scared if they get it wrong. Lots more work on early addition this term. In episode 7, we talked about addition starting as count all. You've got 2 piles of objects, you count every one individually, and then moving to counting on, where you know how many are in one pile and you're counting on the extras, and then spotting the efficiency of counting on from the larger number rather than counting on from the smaller number. We talked about double, double, bump, bump. Hopefully that's still going this term. A little bit of an insight into where this is going. If we talk about an addition, say 13 add 4. 13 add 4. This is something they might work on next year, but it's really helpful to see what foundations you are laying. So a child could touch count every single peg, but it's really helpful if they've moved on to this stage where they know to start with the 13, they already know that's 13, and go 14, 15, 16, 17. But by deliberately teaching these structures of numbers as 5s and extras, children are going to be able to learn to holistically see, there's the 13, so I've got a gap of 2 to fill to 15, and if I'm adding 4, I'm adding a 2 and a 2 to make that 4, and then they can holistically see the 17 in the answer. And that's what some of your children who fly with their maths can do. And by laying down these foundations properly, we're going to be able to ensure that every child can do it, not just the ones who've got it because they've done loads of number at home or because it's just clicked for them. We want to make sure every child thrives with their maths and no child has dyscalculia. And if they're systematically taught these structures of numbers and they learn to use them and they learn to confidently think about maths for themselves and to value their own methods and listen to other methods too, they're all going to do brilliantly. So how do we make them think confidently and independently for themselves? Here are some quick techniques. One, as we move on with addition, we can start to notate addition. We might write the calculation 2 add 3 equals 5, a number sentence. And they can do lots of practice of seeing that 2 and 3 is 5. But it's tempting to think that you have to come up with real world problems for the children to solve. It's actually more powerful to give them the number sentence and say, come up with your own problem. What's meaningful to you that would make sense of this number sentence? And they can all tell you their own stories about 2 add 3 equaling 5. And they come up with great stuff. It's really entertaining to get some insight into their world. But it is really important because it's getting them all thinking for themselves, getting them all problem solving for themselves, but it's also teaching them something called the conservation of calculation. And that is that 2 add 3 always equals 5, no matter what the objects are. Seems obvious to us as adults, but at this stage, that won't have clicked for some children. And they're having to do every calculation from scratch. And by working on this technique, we can make sure every child understands that 1 add 7 is always 8, no matter what the objects are. Therefore, it makes sense to try and remember that result because it's so important and it'll always hold good for you and be useful, no matter what the situation. Another technique that will get children thinking for themselves and also doing some powerful working on maths is estimation. If you've got maybe 15 objects, just show them briefly, cover them up. It has got to be a game. Lots of children hate estimation because it's like getting maths wrong and they don't want to. They want control, they want to get it right. But as long as you turn it into a game, it's fine, where it's just about guesswork. Anyone can try, but then you nudge it on. Can you explain to me how you estimated that there were 10? What were you thinking as you did that? Get them to access their own thinking and learn to describe it. It's such an important skill to develop, one of the most important skills there is in maths, being able to unpack what you've just done and describe it to someone else. So estimation games, that's what they're all about. Getting children to think structurally about numbers, getting them to estimate, getting them to unpack their own thinking, and getting them to think for themselves and recognise that their thinking might be different to the person next to them, and that's all cool. Can still do, I explained in an earlier one, tasks where you reveal objects and then close the box. How many were there? How did you do it? Open it again, get them to show you their different ways. And then there are what we call dot cards, where you've got patterns of dots or stars or whatever shape you want, and you show them to the children and you say, how many? And how did you do it? And again, you'll have loads and loads of different ways of counting these. They might touch count them one at a time, but in different orders. But there's all sorts of ways of grouping them and counting them up as a whole. Child might see that as 2 5s. I'm not going to tell you all the ways because it's fun to discover them. And it's really interesting when children come up with something you've never seen before. Again, it gets every child thinking for themselves, every child valuing their way of seeing the maths. So a few final tips for this term. It's really worth digging out a lot of the apparatus you've used this year again and letting the children have another play with it. Let them gravitate to the things they want to play with so that they can work on the things they feel are relevant to them. We had things like the pizzas and the magnetic apple fractions in episode 6, and then we had the number threading beads in episode 7, lots of measuring equipment in episode 8. Get it all out again, let them play. Computer apps, there's definitely lots of great stuff out there. Now's a lovely time to practice subitization again. Subitization was where children saw small numbers of objects and could instantly recognise them as being 1, 2, 3 or 4 and tap that number. Now they've learnt their digits, they should be able to work on things like that. Any activity on an app that you think will be fun for them or they find fun, surprising to you, let them have a play. There's lots of great TV series, often available free on the internet or on YouTube, the Num Tums, the Number Blocks, the Number Jacks, all this kind of thing. Work on early numbers. If that fascinates them, let them watch, or encourage parents to let them watch it over the summer. Over the summer we can go back to some of those orchard games from early in the series, encourage parents to play things like ladybirds and spotty dogs, and there's one where they get on and off the bus. All this stuff is great, short games, set them up for the summer, but it's a bonus, it doesn't have to be done. So there is a really simple planning document that goes with this series. It's just a page per term prompt that you can, in a Word document, so you can hack it around and make it whatever you want it to be as your aide-memoire for the year, to make sure that you do all the things that you mean to do and can tick them off as you go. That's available for free download in the Expert Primary Maths Teacher Planning Facebook group. So what comes next? Well, I publish these videos every Thursday at 3 o'clock, and next week I'll be moving on to starting series 2, which is all about English Year 1. That's teaching children who are 5 or 5 to 6 years old. But I will also be talking to some teachers and some experts about their ways of teaching primary maths in reception class, the series we've just done on the ground. I've tried to cover the core of what it is that children need to understand in this series. And then there are loads of ways of doing it brilliantly. And these episodes will be there to inspire you to see how different people do it, to inspire you to do it in the way that you want to do it. And I hope you're going to find those fun too, as and when I can get them filmed. So I'll add those extra episodes onto the end of this series as and when we manage to film them. But in the meantime, we'll be carrying on with series 2. So please join us for that, or encourage your friends who teach the year above you to join us. I'm Rebecca the Maths Lady, here to help you love your maths teaching as much as I always have. Have a great day.